Hello and welcome to the Baby Loss Podcast with me, Gabriella Austin. This podcast is for bereaved parents like myself to share their story around baby loss and miscarriage. In this episode, I have the honour of listening to Ruth tell Madeline's story on the year she would have turned 30. Baby loss is unfortunately more common than people think and certainly more common than discussed. Whilst I would like to raise awareness around this taboo subject, my main aim is to provide parents with a safe place to talk about their babies, wherever they may be in their journey. There is no judgment here and every journey is different. Welcome to the second series where we continue to tell the stories of our babies gone too soon. Trigger warning for this episode, discussion on stillbirth, baby loss, miscarriage, living children, organ retention, postmortems, and contains explicit content. Hi Ruth, when you are ready, can you please tell me about Madeline?
Hi Gabby, thank you very much. Madeline, that sounds very strange to actually hear myself say her name and to hear you say it as well. And I'm sure to many of us that have had a loss, it's strangely music to my ears, if that makes sense. Yeah, don't often get to say it these days. So Madeline was still born on the 25th of January 1992. So a quick bit of mathematics, she would have been 30 January just gone of this year. 30 years, where's that gone? Goodness me, it seems to have whizzed by on many levels, but life stood still that day as well. And here we are, yeah, bearing the scars. But amazingly, she's given us so much as well. So when how did it all begin really? Mike and I had been married, got brilliant careers, and decided, well, oh yes, okay, well, we'll start a family. Fortunately for us, we didn't have any issues with the fertility side of things, which I know is a huge, big thing for many people. And I fell pregnant quite quickly with Madeline, had an amazing pregnancy up until about 27 weeks, when I happened to one day when I was at home notice reduced movements. I'd got a friend that was a midwife. Mike was working late. I phoned her up and said, oh, baby's stopped moving. She said to me, jump in the bath, Ruth. Your baby goes mad when you're in the bath, which she did. Jumped in the bath and I was waiting to watch my stomach ripple around and it didn't really. And I almost convinced myself that perhaps it had once, but, and it was extremely unusual. So she said, well, just rest up till Mike comes home, see if baby moves, which I did do. Mike came home and I phoned her again. She said, phone the unit and see if they'll take you in. By this time, it was probably about 9 o'clock in the evening, and I phoned the unit and it was very much, well, it's your first baby, these things, quite a lot of people don't feel their babies move very much and it's first time, that you've been pregnant, etc., etc. And I just knew that something perhaps wasn't quite right and was really insistent. And my parting words to this particular midwife that evening were, okay, if you can sleep with your conscience free tonight, knowing that we've had this conversation, then I'll put the phone down. Well, if you'd like to come in and we'll see. So off Mike and I trotted and I was monitored and everything. And they decided to keep me in overnight. Well, being first baby, being first time mum, I just was a little bit naive and thought, I've become a social admission because it's now 10:30 in the evening and they won't send me home. Little did I know that the monitor readings weren't quite right and they continued to monitor me on and off throughout the night. And the following morning, I went and had a scan And the consultant came to see me and she said, can you get yourself to King's College Hospital? And we looked, Mike and I looked at each other and said, yes. Why? She said, well, baby's not in a particularly good condition and has taken on a lot of fluid and we don't know why. So we've made an appointment for you to go to King's College Hospital, and that was our link hospital because we used to live in Stevenage at the time. So, and she said, and you may have to stay in, not too sure. Okay, fine. So we went and picked my mother up from the school she was working at the time, because if I was staying in, I didn't want Mike to travel back home on his own. And we whizzed up to King's College Hospital and saw the most wonderful, amazing Kypros Nicolaides. And for any of you that watch any documentaries or anything like that will absolutely know he is a legend in his field.
Okay.
And we saw him. I had an amniocentesis done, lots of further investigations, and he said that baby wasn't very well, that suspected an infection but didn't know what type, and that it would be a 50-50% chance of survival, but depends on where we are with the infection. If we're on the tail end of it, pretty good. If we're at the beginning of it, probably not. But we need to monitor this. So go to your hospital every other day for monitoring and come back and see us in a week if the fluid levels are the same or greater, because we'll have to tap them off. Fine. So we went home and dutifully went to the hospital every other day to be monitored. And the readings were a little bit low and a little bit sluggish, but she was still moving around. I'd got a lot of reduced movements, nowhere near what she was like. And we got through to the following week. So that took me up to 28 weeks and everything was still fine. Fluid levels were still okay. So it was to continue with monitoring at my local hospital, which we did. Went back in on the 29 weeks and the sonographer turned around and said, I'm really sorry, but there's no fetal heartbeat to be seen. So where we were amongst all of that in days and everything, I've no idea, because 2 days prior to when we'd gone, there had been movements. So somewhere within that time, she'd passed away.
Ruth, I'm so sorry to hear those horrible words. There's no heartbeat.
No.
I'm ever so sorry.
I mean, Mike and I walked out of that ultrasound room in floods of tears, and as you can imagine, you've got a whole waiting area full of parents, sort of beaming smiles, waiting to have their scans, and we walk out and you just want to scream at that point. We went to the ward and saw our consultant, and she was absolutely amazing, and just said, right, this is the process, this is what's going to have to happen. You're now 29 weeks, so you've got to deliver this baby. These are your options. Go home, we'll send the midwives around to see you. So we went back home. This was on the Monday. And that afternoon, the midwives came to see me, the community midwives came to see me and turned around and said, okay, this is what's going to happen, this is the process, you're going to have to go through induction, and explained all that to us. And they said that we will be there, we will deliver your baby for you, it will be the two of us, however long it takes, etc., etc. Brilliant. Okay. So we had time at home, told parents, told friends, parents came round, It was a long night. We were sort of just going off to bed, and my consultant phoned me and she said to me, Ruth, she said, I just want you to have the option here. She said that you can either go onto the gynae ward to have your baby, or you can come onto the antenatal ward. She said that's the only two places we can accommodate you. I want you to be aware of, if you come onto the antenatal ward, you know, it's full of pregnancy, crying babies that have just been delivered, etc. Or you can be on the gynae ward and you'll have a side room there. So I said to her, I said, I need to go to the maternity ward. And I can remember Mike looking at me in absolute horror. And I just said, I need to go onto the maternity ward because I cannot live in a bubble of leaving the hospital and bumping into somebody that is either pregnant or pushing a pram or having a car seat with a little one in it. And my biggest thing for my own strength was to know that what was going to be our loss was somebody else's joy. And I needed to hear those babies crying for other people. And I needed to know that perhaps one day it would be us, but this time it wasn't. And so with that, the consultant said, please be aware that if you change your mind by the morning, then let us know. So I didn't change my mind. Mike was very happy with that choice as well, because obviously it was me going through it. And on the Tuesday morning, I walked around the house showing her the room, or my stomach, showing her the nursery and things like that we'd prepped, saying goodbye to it all. And off we went to the hospital. We were actually admitted to the postnatal ward rather than the antenatal ward, which was fine. We had a side room there. And they started the induction on the Tuesday afternoon. Well, at this point, I was 28 weeks, and well, she was born 28 weeks and 6 days, so I was like 28 weeks pregnant, and obviously not ready to deliver a baby. So it took until the Saturday evening before she was delivered, and that was just continual induction.
Oh my goodness.
They rested me on the Friday because on the Thursday evening I'd gone into shock, and they'd started a whole host of intravenous antibiotics and everything, because obviously I was getting infections and things like that. So and then recommenced on the Saturday morning, and at 11:30 in the evening she was born. Prior to that, I mean, my midwives that had come to visit me at home, they kept popping into the hospital during the course of the week, checking on me and everything. Don't worry, we'll both be there when it happens. Through the ward, give us a ring. They were absolutely brilliant. And whilst we were sort of chatting when I was in labour, they sort of said, oh, have you got any flowers upstairs, Ruth? And I said yes. And it was in the days where you could have flowers in. Oh yeah, remember those days well. And they went and collected some flowers and made the most beautiful little posy and tied it all up in a ribbon. And Madeline came out on her side and sort of just naturally lay on her side with her little hands up, and they put this little posy in her hands when they put her in a Moses basket. And we just call her our little flower girl, because she was our little flower girl. So which was so nice of them. And I can remember we had lots of time with her afterwards when we were born. Mike's parents, my mum came in to see us. My dad he didn't want to. I can remember at one point them saying, well, the doctor needs to see her now. And I said, why? He needs to check her over and certify her, Ruth, because you've got to remember my background is nursing as well. So this terminology wasn't strange to me. And I just turned around and I said, he can come in here and certify her here whilst I'm here watching over her. You can tell that she's dead. and I just said, I do not want anybody messing with her. And because she'd taken such a long time to be delivered, we were warned that her skin would be very fragile and very paper thin. And sure enough, just on her little elbows and on her little knees, she was a little bit raw. And so the thought of somebody taking blankets on or off her, if anybody was going to do it, it had to be me. And the doctor did come in and did all his paperwork and had a chat with us and everything, and off he went. And we were then left with her for as long as we wanted to. The midwives, even back then, offered us to have Madeline with us overnight. We chose not to. We were told that any time we wanted to, they would bring her to us, or we could go to her, which I now look back on with all my knowledge and the work I've done with SANS. I'm immensely grateful that that was available to us back then, even though we didn't take up any of those opportunities because we didn't want to. I then stayed in hospital. Mike stayed with me for the next 2 days because of infection markers that I'd got, and was then discharged home. My midwives were absolutely brilliant, still came to see me at home. My consultant phoned us every day for a whole week. We were very, very fortunate. She suggested that we put an answering machine on so that we could vet calls, but just leave a message to say that we're okay, that we're resting, those sorts of things. Our vicar came to see us, and we then sort of spoke about funeral arrangements. What do we do now? Because all this was so new to us, it, quite bewildering, really. You're just thrown into a complete turmoil of having to do things and organise things and explore options that I never in my wildest dreams thought that I'd be doing, because it should have been a completely different scenario. In Stevenage, we had 2 cemeteries, so there was Mike and I walking around these cemeteries, trying to choose which one we wanted, if any, where would be her final resting place, if any. It was most bizarre, really, now when I think about it and look back, and can have time to reflect, and I think, I don't really know where we got the strength from. Anyway, we chose the newest of the 2 cemeteries, not because it was new, but just because of its location. It sits on the top of the hillside and overlooks a rolling down, and there in the distance is the hospital that we gave birth at, and it just seemed the right place for her to be. She's cremated, and her ashes are interred in the Pink Rose Garden, our little flower girl. So, and that's her final resting place. We were then very fortunate. Oh, we did have a postmortem as well. Again, personal choice. And our decision to have that done was because she was our firstborn. I'd had a textbook pregnancy up until that point. We were obviously wanting to go on and have a further family, but if there was anything that wasn't right between Mike and I, that would perhaps make us think about other options and other choices as to, which line we went down. So she had her postmortem done, and her funeral was on the 6th of February. We then waited for our results to come through. She had her postmortem done at Guy's Hospital in London, again, because that was our link hospital at the time. that came back with the fact that she had a very rare form of Down syndrome, mosaic Down syndrome, which is one of these almost fluke cases of Down syndrome. So Mike and I then decided, but again, nothing that would cause her death. So because there are plenty of people out there with Down syndrome that has survived. And it's the type of Down syndrome that you may have, you might have physical features of it, you might not, you might have the heart issues, you might not, you know, it's a small amount of the chromosome that breaks away. It's not the complete trisomy 21. So we then had a choice to go for genetic counselling so that we could learn more about it and see if it was going to be something between us that, you know, we needed to consider. And I can remember going to Guy's Hospital and seeing a geneticist who'd had her results, and we walked into that room and she turned around and she said, "So, are you pregnant again?" Sorry, that's why we're here, because have you got our papers? We've had a stillbirth, had a postmortem, these were the results we've come to see you about, and you're asking if I'm pregnant again. Well, we're not foolish people, we wouldn't have done that without knowing everything about our daughter. She then explained the situation and said it would be sheer fluke if it happened again and carry on. So we came away, it was kind of bittersweet because on the one hand we were absolutely elated, but on the other hand it seemed to be perhaps the final piece of Madeline's journey, and you were sort of saying goodbye to that really, which was hard. So in our quest, if at first you don't succeed, try again. We decided to continue on, and if we could continue with our, you know, being able to have a family, we would. And 13 months after Madeline was born, I gave birth to Jack. And then 2 years, 7 months later to William. And that completed our family. But again, we are eternally grateful that we've been able to have the two boys, well, now young men. But there's also another side to Madeline that we learned about as well along our journey. And it wasn't a particularly pleasant one either, again, that we had to deal with. But just before I come on to that, we then moved from Stevenage to Horsham when William was 12 weeks old, due to work commitments with Mike, and we knew that we would have to make the move at some point, and we wanted to move so that we could learn about a new area prior to them starting nursery and schools and things like that. So timing wise wasn't brilliant, but nonetheless we've moved here, and we've obviously been extremely happy because we've now been here for 28 years. 27 years I think it is, yeah, 27 years. So but in that was hard because that we have no family network here or anything, and we came down as a family of 4 and not a family of 5. And how on earth were you ever going to tell somebody that Madeline existed? Mm-hmm. You know, you're trying to create new friends and things like that, and it was very difficult. You didn't really want to go, oh, and by the way, just to let you know, because I'm sure as many of the parents know that it can either kill or cure a conversation quite quickly. So there are probably still a lot of people out there that know me that don't know about Madeline. Some maybe through my own choice, others are probably just because it's never been in the conversation. I think probably everybody that I really want to know knows about her. I was absolutely dandy down here for about 8 years, and then I was really hit badly with depression. And a lot of that evolved around Madeline and her not being here and things like that. So we went into great depth about bringing her down here, but that would be more detrimental, we felt, to our health and well-being than her being where she was. And we always came back to the fact that the plot we chose for her, overlooking the hospital, was so right, and that's where she deserved to be. But in doing so, I spoke to our vicar at the church at the time, and he could tell this particular day I was really upset. And I spoke to him about Madeline, probably for the first time, and he said to me, "But Ruth," he said, "would it help, my dear," he said, "if we had Madeline in a memorial book?" And I said, "But we don't have her remains in a churchyard." And that was kind of like their policy. And he said, "My dear, there's always exceptions to the rule." So Madeline now has her name in the memorial book at St Mary's Church in Horsham, and I have a huge sense of her belonging to Horsham now, where we live, which is wonderful. So, I every now and again, if I feel that I need to, I'll go down and I'll just sit and I'll light a candle, and the church wardens will happily turn over her page to the 25th of January so that I can just see her name written down. And I get a huge sense of warmth and sort of satisfaction from that. I don't go half as often now as I needed to at the time, so it's really served purpose, but I will always go on or around her birthday, depending on whether we're going back up home or whether we're here for her birthday or not. So, but I'll always go down then. And round about Christmas time, I'll pop in. So that's nice. But going back to the other side of Madeline that we discovered, it was our choice to have a postmortem, and I want to make all your listeners aware that this does not happen now. And I cannot stress that enough, that this is not the policy or protocol that is followed now.
Okay.
Please remember that this was 30 years ago. With that in mind, but you want Madeline's story, and this is her story. There was a big scandal on the news about Alder Hey Children's Hospital, where babies and children had died, had postmortems, and the hospital had kept certain organs and had not got parental consent to do so. I don't know, I cannot remember now how that was ever discovered and how that came about, but I can remember watching the news at the time, and the presenter turned around and said her parting words were, "It has also happened at other hospitals throughout the country." So straight away, my mind's ticking. Mm-hmm. Mike and I had a long conversation about it. He said, "You want to know, don't you?" And I went, "I don't know, leave it with me. You know, I know where she is. I know what I believe in. You know, she's complete. Her soul is where it is," so on and so forth. So Mike and I spoke about it for quite some months, on and off, and in the end, and he said, "Well, what are we going to do if we find out that it's involved Madeline?" And I said, "There's nothing we can do, but I think I'd rather know than not know." So I got in touch with Guy's Hospital. They were absolutely amazing. And we had a letter back confirming that they had indeed got her heart, liver, and lungs. So we then contacted them further and said, okay, you've got them. Is she being used for research? They confirmed that yes, she was. We were then very content because out of her little life, she was providing students with something to be able to enhance their studies, and she wasn't being wasted. So we then said, okay, we want to know when she ceases to be of any useful service to you, because obviously they're only going to be really, really dinky. And as time goes on, you're going to have more and more people that are going to be donating organs and everything. So if there comes a time where, you don't need her anymore, we need to be informed straight away. So absolutely no problem. It was all logged and everything, and we were happy with that. Time went ticking by, and it was coming up to what would have been her 21st birthday. And I started to get a bit jittery again. And I thought, do you know what? If there's ever a time when I'm going to contact Guys again, I think it's now, because if they don't need her, it would be a nice time to wrap it up in her 21st year. So I did contact Guys again. That took a while because obviously all the contact details I'd got were completely obsolete from back then.
Before.
Yeah, exactly. And Guys were absolutely amazing, came back to me, and the lady thanked me. She said, it's been such an easy conversation to have with you, Ruth. She said, and I really appreciate that these conversations and, not easy to be had. And I said, well, is she of any, use to you still? Because she said, and she confirmed that everything was tagged and labelled and etc. She could even tell me how often she'd been used in and out logbook, and all the rest of it, which was really sort of quite heartwarming, really, in a way. And she said, but whilst we are having this conversation, and I said, you don't need her anymore, do you? And she said, no. And I said, right, okay, what are our options? And the other reason that we got in touch as well, Gabby, is because it was part of Madeline that our boys didn't know about. And I said to Mike that because we were going out and about a lot more on our own, I said, if anything happens to us, the boys know where her box is, her treasure box, but they don't know that side to her story. And I'd hate for them to open their box and find all this paperwork and think, what on earth was this that we never knew about? And so I said, I'd rather it have come from us than them discover it because of some other means. So we sat both boys down and we explained to them what happened and everything. And we then explained that we were going to go to Guy's Hospital because on speaking to them, we'd arranged to have a little memorial service there for this particular event. So the boys definitely wanted to be involved, which was really lovely. So we took up a small flower arrangement and everything. We were met and taken over to the chaplain there where we met. I'd been in touch with the chaplain prior to all of this. And we had a lovely little service in the chaplain. They brought in a beautiful little white casket with a lovely silver engraved plaque on the top of it. We'd all written little cards and everything. And we decided that we would let them dispose of her or those particular parts, because our only other option was to take them back home and put them in with her plot. And it was too much. It was too traumatic for Mike and I to do that. So I asked where she would be going, and I'd checked it all out, done our homework on it all, and I said that she doesn't go into just general clinical waste and all that sort of thing, and I kind of like, sniggered over that because of my own history with working in a hospital and everything. I'm thinking, I can just imagine it's my dark sense of humour. I'm thinking I can just imagine these bits going in the flipping clinical waste, and that's it. And they told me exactly where she'd go and everything, and she'd go either at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, and she'd be couriered over and that sort of thing, so it's fine. And they did keep me informed every step of the way, which was lovely. But after the service, we then took some flowers, we went across the road and we did a petal drop in the Thames, the four of us, and then we went off to St Paul's Cathedral and sat in a chapel and all lit candles, and then just went out for a meal. So that was on the 19th of December, before her 21st birthday. So there's that side to Madeline as well, but we tend not to reflect on that at all. Her birthday is the 25th of January, and sometimes if I'm a bit crotchety at that time of the year, oh, for goodness sake, Ruth, what's wrong with yourself? Pull yourself together. And then I'll be like,
Yeah.
it might be the 17th or it might be the 20th. Some days, sometimes it is the 19th, ironically. So it's quite amazing how it's clearly there, but comes forward in another way. So that's Madeline's story, yes. And then here I am 30 years on this year, and I don't know where time goes, really.
No.
I really don't.
Oh my goodness, thank you. I didn't know about the second part of Madeline's story. If you ever did share it at group, I obviously wasn't there. I don't know how to word this. Very sad, and I don't know how I would have felt or reacted to knowing that this part of Isabella wasn't where I thought she was. I'll be honest, but you also I don't know until it happens. But when you were talking about the doctor having to come in and see Madeline, and you said, "Oh no, if any of that's going to happen, it's going to happen here," and then her skin being very fragile. We decided that evening to not have a postmortem, so Isabella didn't have one, and because, like, you didn't want other people touching Madeline, and all we ever say in group and to each other, even now, we always say, it was my choice, it's personal choice. I'm not, nobody's right or wrong. You don't know what the fuck is going on because your baby has just died.
Yeah.
That was the decision that we made. I didn't want anybody touching her.
We didn't dress Madeline or anything, purely because of that very reason, is that by putting clothes on, because we'd chosen to have a post-mortem, I knew those clothes would have to come off. Mike and I were not going to be the ones being able to take them off, so consequently nobody was going to take them off. So she was wrapped up in a blanket that my grandmother had knitted and everything, and that went with her all the way. And I can remember asking how she would get to Guy's Hospital, and they said by courier. And now with my work that I did for SANS, I now understand what type of courier that would be and how she would have been transported and everything. But at the time, I can remember falling about in fits of giggles because I can just have envisaged her going in a pannier on somebody's motorbike. And it just made me laugh. And I was, that's my girl, going up in style, and it kind of like still puts a smile on my face today, as you can tell. And that's why I'm very careful about talking about the postmortem side of things, and why I wouldn't have freely said it in a group, because it's obviously a very emotive subject for most people anyway. And I cannot stress enough, this was 30 years ago. It doesn't happen. Laws don't allow it to happen now. And we just happened to be one of those families that it did affect. But I think because we found out about it so many years further down the line, that we were stronger and more able to cope with it. And because of my faith and my beliefs, I know where she is, and I could deal with the fact that they were just, parts of her body, that it was her soul that was the interest to me. And the fact as well that she'd been of use in her little life. It hadn't been in vain. I think if I'd have known, or if we'd have known, should I say, that they'd have had her and done absolutely nothing with her, I think that would have destroyed us.
Yes.
But the fact that she'd been of use, that was a great comfort. Yeah, huge comfort, in fact. So that was nice. And again, through the work of SANS, it was really nice, because I was able to turn around to them when I was speaking to Guy's Hospital and said, I know this is going to sound really, really weird, but can you take some photographs of them for me, please? That doesn't sound weird at all, Ruth. I'm thinking it does, even as I'm saying it. That sounds really weird, but
Doesn't sound weird. I
need some photographs. So she said, that's absolutely fine, I will take them. She said, no, actually, she said, I am going to get our photographer to take them for you, so that they will be professional photographs. I said, that's fine. And I said, can you print them for me and double envelope them for me? She said, yes. We were presented with them at that little service we had for her, and I've never opened that envelope. But it doesn't matter, I've got them.
Yes.
Yeah. And I needed those to come away with, and Mike and I have got no interest at the moment, don't know if we ever will, of actually opening that envelope. But it's knowing that we've got it should we want to have it. Because obviously 30 years ago, we were on 35mm film. You had to wait until your film had finished to get it developed. And we don't have any what I would call nice photographs of Madeline. They're very blurry because the midwives tried to take them close up at the time. We know it's her, but you couldn't put them up on the wall or anything, because you just wouldn't know. You wouldn't know that they're her. But we've done other things to include her. So we've got a picture on the wall that's made up of Scrabble tiles with our names in it, and Madeline's in there, so it's our way of including her. And the flowers that we had for that particular event when we went to Guy's, I've got a picture of those in a small frame, and that's with the other pictures of members of the family, so we know what it represents. But probably anybody coming in and looking at it would think, oh, it's just a nice, nice display of flowers there. It wouldn't mean anything, but it's our personal sort of memories of her and everything. But that's all that we have at home of her. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's seems very strange, but it's been this is going to sound really weird. It's been a wonderful opportunity, Gabby, so thank you for allowing me to actually be able to talk about her. We don't often get that opportunity.
You're very welcome. I thank you for sharing her story with me. I always remember that your little girl was Madeline, and whenever I see little Madeline cakes, or if that's even how you pronounce those cakes, Madeline cakes, I think of her, I think of you, and I coming to group was really hard. And it was like Fiona and I were speaking about, it's the one place you don't want to be.
Absolutely.
But you find your people, and we come from all walks of life, and different parts of the county as well, because obviously at that time it was only in Horsham, so we all sort of came together, and I wasn't living in Horsham at the time. I took so much advice from you, and I know that you just made group and grieving easier. And I use so many of your little phrases. So when we talk about friends and parents talking about our children and damned if they do and they're damned if they don't, that's one of my favourites. I learned that from you. And when you're talking about some people or friends or colleagues or whoever, only they know you as a family of 4, and you choose to tell people about Madeline. I remember having a conversation. I remember this one group session vividly, and I used to feel quite guilty if I didn't mention Isabella. So obviously when I used to fly and I'd meet all kinds of different people and people I'd never met before, and I used to feel like I had to tell them. And you told me it was okay to not tell everybody because it didn't matter what anybody else thought or said or knew. It was what I thought, said, knew. And I remember you saying that somebody at the school gates would ask you, you know, how many children you have, or are they both boys, or do you have any girls? And you would answer appropriately. And if you didn't mention Madeline's name, you'd sort of look up and acknowledge her and say, she doesn't need to know about you, you're my little girl. And some people weren't worthy of hearing their names or their stories.
Yeah.
So, and there were some groups that were really hard.
Yeah.
And I talk about the session where everybody except myself announced their pregnancy.
Yeah.
In that one, that was
exceptionally difficult.
It was so heartbreaking, but equally you're so happy for everybody else because you've got this really shit thing in common.
Yeah.
And I always hoped that I would be them and wanting advice on how to navigate, you know, pregnancy after loss. Obviously we never got there, but I was really pleased that you were there when that during that session. And you just came and you gave me a cuddle and you sat next to Rob and you sat next to me and Rob, and you were just really supportive. And I always felt like I had this special connection with Fiona because she doesn't have living children. But yeah, you were just there from day one, and you're still here now, 8 years on.
Yeah. And I have to say, because this is not for me to say, that I never took for granted my position within those meetings. Every time I came to those meetings, it was an honour. I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say it was an honour to be a part of everybody's journey, if only just for those few hours.
I need a tissue. I'm so sorry. I should have had them ready.
To give a big hug.
I know, I want to give you a hug. Okay.
But it's been an absolute, and still remains, a huge big part of my life to have been a part of people's journey, and for everybody to have shared their most vulnerable moments with me, It was never taken lightly. Every single one of you are individuals with your own stories to tell, and I just hope that group was able to support you during those times. As much as group was there for everybody else, it also helped me. It also helped me in my journey. Yeah. And I guess in a way, if it wasn't the group, I don't know where I'd be, 30 years on and accepting that Madeline was our firstborn and, made me into the person, or helped make me into the person I am today, because I know that I'm not the same person I was before. There are some days where I don't particularly like the person I am, depending on what side of the bed I've gotten out of. I've certainly grown as a person. I probably have less tolerance with some people. I probably say it how it is now. The group taught me an awful lot, and huge honor to have been in that position and to be a part of it. And I hugely miss it. I hugely miss all the people that I supported, and just being a part of it. Really, it's like you say, it's a group you really didn't want to belong to, but oh boy, mighty glad that you found it when you were there. And that goes for me as well, all because I hosted it. That goes for me as well. Yeah. And I just thank you for the work that you're doing now to be able to give parents the opportunity to be able to speak and to talk about their journeys. And yeah, this has been hard for me today, even after all these years. Yeah.
It's been very sad.
Yeah, it's good to talk about.
Sorry.
No, don't apologise.
It's been lovely to speak her name.
Yeah, so thank you, Gabby, for giving me that opportunity.
You're very welcome. And yeah, exactly. I miss group, and COVID was horrible in many ways, but it tore communities like us apart.
Yes. Yeah.
And sorry, I'm just going to close that. Yeah, it tore communities like us apart, and I'm sort of trying to get us back together.
Yeah.
One guest at a time.
It's amazing that you're giving up your time to do all of this and to reach the wider community as well. It's wonderful. So thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you so much for finding and continuing to listen to the Baby Loss podcast. If you would like to be a guest on my podcast and share your baby story, or if you would like your Baby Loss charity featured, then please get in touch by searching Baby Loss Podcast on your podcast app, Facebook, Instagram, and my YouTube channel. If you have been affected by today's episode, then please reach out. SANDS can be reached via their website, sands.org.uk, spelt SANDS, their Facebook page and their helpline on 0808 164 3332. Oscar's Wish Foundation is a charity offering bereavement support to families in Sussex and throughout the UK. They can be found on Facebook. If you live in Gloucestershire, you can contact Footsteps Counselling and Care by visiting their website, Facebook page, or contacting their helpline on 01452 308 618. If you require immediate support, you can call the Samaritans 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for free on 116 123. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.